we have with us Julian Kamau and Oliver August, who have been working on how to localize articles for news audiences. Julian and Oliver, welcome. I'll leave the floor to you to please take us through your presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Happy to see all of you here. So I'm going to take you through our tool. Our tool is called Clark, and it's a tool meant to repurpose content. And I'll introduce the team. So basically, it's myself, Julian Kamau from Nation Media Group, and my colleague Oliver August, who we met at Nation Media Group. Joined in 2022 as a digital manager, and Oliver joined in 2021 as a chief technology officer. So I'm more on the editorial side, and August is both on the editorial and the technical side. Next slide. So our starting hypothesis is that machines cannot yet and may never be able to create content from scratch without at least some human input. So we are very aware that as much as we are doing this, there's some level of human effort that is required in the tools that we are creating. So what machines can do well is basically improve existing content and tailor it for specific purposes or niches. Basically, content that has been created by humans, and then technology or AI comes and improves on the content. Our focus is on niche publishing. So parts of it have grown rapidly in the internet age. And what do I mean by niche publishing? We have a challenge in the sense that national newspapers or media organizations struggle to serve local audiences, either because of resources or also because we don't have representatives in those regions. But the stories do exist. There's a lot of archived content in media organizations where we can use this content and repurpose it for the local audiences. So the content that could be repurposed is sports, local news, trade publishing, and this could be repurposed either through geographic audiences or demographic niches. Next slide. So our goal, again, is to repurpose content and make it more relevant for underserved niche audiences. So we want to produce niche content from existing articles. When you look at national newsrooms, they have a lot of content. Some of them, giving examples of where we work, have operated for over 100 years. And there's a lot of archive content, but it's focusing on the national, at the scope of the national stage. So how do we write content, for example, for guys in Eldoret? So these are counties within Kenya, for example. I think I've seen somebody join in from Kenya. They would understand this. Also from London, the different cities, how are we able to tell stories for these local audiences? So this content was created by humans inside the same organizations or even outside of it. So what our tool will do is that it will enable national newsrooms to create local editions with very little effort. For example, localizing a national article on knife crime by county. And right there, the diagram next to it just shows how you can localize to the different counties. Next. So again, this is based of modular journalism. So our basic methodology is to focus on modular story formats, where when you look at an article, every paragraph serves a different purpose. So each article has sets parts, which as anecdotes, it could be a quote, it could be context, it could be background. So every article has a standard way of writing it. So how do you get to replace these different aspects to be able to represent the different communities? So they're usually single paragraphs. So what Clark does is that, one, it identifies the parts that could be reworked or repurposed for the local audiences. Then after it identifies, it generates content to serve the local the niche audience that you're trying to look at. And again, like I mentioned, it could be geographic. It could also be based on demographics. And then it replaces the parts that apply to that niche that you're trying to serve. So again, this is based off a previously explored project by JournalismAI Collab Challenges 2021. context. So this is how basically the tool works. So this is the introduction. So this on the left is how an article would be. So when you have an article, you probably have an introduction, then you have a quote, then you have details, an example, an anecdote, there's context, and then there's more details. So you feed this as the original article, and then what Clark does is that it identifies the parts that need replacing. So, for example, you had a national quote, you could pick a quote from a city or a county that is going to be localized to the audience that you're trying to serve. So, in this case, the repurposed article has replaced the quote. Introduction stays the same. You replace the quote, and then the details most likely will be the same. And then again, for the example that you're going to use, this again, it identifies that you could swap and have the right details there. And then an anecdote remains the same, context and more details. Basically, the tool is able to know what to replace with what. And from the tool, we will feed the original article, and then we will put links of articles that it will use to replace, where it can feed from. So this is already existing content, but you're able to use many sources of content of already existing articles to replace the new article. So I'll hand over to my colleague Oliver to get into the technical aspects of it.
Yes, hi everyone. Okay, so far the theory, now for some practice. As we got into the weeds of this, there are a few sort of pragmatic adjustments that we had to make along the way. First one was to deal with the problem of hallucinations. Letting an LLM loose on creating content on the training data posed a lot of challenges. And so we opted for more of a walled garden where we limit the source data to inputs that we had vetted. That's, could possibly be changed later, but seemed like a reasonable pragmatic choice. The second thing we looked at was, as Julian explained earlier, we want to be able to serve multiple niches, whether geographic or demographic, by taking an overall trend story, for example, and then localizing it to one specific group and do that repeatedly, so that you could imagine, as the example earlier, where you had the example of a story about a national story about knife crime, and then you find the local data for each county, let's say. What we realized is that technically it's possible to do all of those steps simultaneously for every county in a country. It increases technical complexity, and we decided what we're going to do is run our tool for every niche separately, simply to save on time and complexity for the moment. And lastly, we suddenly realized that the process running from taking a national or overarching trend and localizing it down to a specific community, that momentum could also be reversed, where one could take a very local thing, something specific to a community or demographic group, and try to broaden it out and see where this fits into larger trends, which we've come to call to contextualize it. So our tool ended up being geared at doing both of those things in the end. Now I'm going to take you through some of the sort of high-level architecture of basically how we broke down this problem and dealt with it. We have three ingredients really in what we're doing. The first one we call our base article, that is to be repurposed. So that could be, an article about knife crime across the nation, let's say. Then we need some additional sources in order to localize the story for individual communities. So that would be potentially the URLs for local articles on a knife crime incident in a part of Leeds, for example, or it could be notes from particular individuals, which they might have put into for example, a Google Doc that we can access as well. And then lastly, we have what we call flags. In order to flag for the for Clark, for our tool, which particular paragraphs to work on in modular fashion, as explained earlier. And we do that in particular by putting 3 stars at the beginning of the paragraph. I'm going to run you through sort of at a high level what this looks like. And again, it was very important to us to sort of figure out what is the balance of human inputs and machine inputs. That was something that interested us. So what it starts with is a human editor choosing a base article. Let's say that article about a knife crime trend, followed by what niches is this to be repurposed for? In this example, for example, for local counties. And then thirdly, to put flags into the base article by inserting 3 stars at the specific paragraphs. After which the human editor presses the submit button and then waits for the tool to process. Now, during this time, this is what happens. This is what Clark does. First, it ingests the human-created base article. Second, reads the flags in it for which paragraphs to repurpose. Third, browses the source material that has specific information for the local niches. And fourth, then relates that source material to the flagged paragraphs in the original base article, inserts new paragraphs that are rewritten based on the source material into the base article, and then goes over the entire article that's now made up of disjointed paragraphs to polish and turn out a single coherent piece of writing. Now, here is a look at the technical layout. So this is a web-based application. It's fully self-contained. It's not just a standalone algorithm. It uses GPT-4 Turbo, accessed via an API. Application logic is in Python, hosted in AWS. And on the bottom right, you can see a screenshot of what the tool looks like. This is a web-based user interface. At the top right is basically, I'm sorry, it might be a little small for you at the moment. I can probably, no, I can't quite enlarge it right now. It's a drop-down menu to choose whether to localize or contextualize. Below that, an input field for URLs for the source material. And it can be as many URLs as one wants to put in there. And underneath that is the place to put the base article and insert the flags at that point, followed by pressing the submit button at the bottom, which then results in the gray field on the right of the screen being filled with the modified article. I mean, here it's sort of explained again. You can see that now the modified article is filled in on the right. We've gone through, just to go over this one more time. One chooses whether to localize or contextualize, input the source URLs, paste in the base article, and flag which paragraphs to repurpose, and then go into processing. And here's a quick look at the technical architecture. It is, frankly, relatively straightforward. This is what you see here is the interplay between, GPT on the left and our tool in the middle, and we've listed a list of applications that are used in the process. I'm going to go on to the prompt engineering, which is really where the more significant work has taken place. There are 3 levels of prompting going to the LLM. Actually, I'm going to flick slightly back for 1 second. If you look at the yellow colored boxes in the logic in the center of the screen, those are the 3 prompting areas that I'm going to talk about here. That's where they sit in the logic. The first one is to go to the source material and go through 3 different sublayers of prompting, which involve, what sort of persona does the LLM take on, and then to create a summary of the material to use, and lastly, to exclude any meta commentary that the LLM might insert, because that's a problem we had early on. So that now creates something from the source material that can be related to the base article, or specifically the paragraphs within that. So then the second prompting level is the combination of the original content and the summaries of the source material, taking into account whether one localizes or contextualizes. And then lastly is a refinement prompt, where the LLM takes the finished modular product and makes sure it runs through and reads well in terms of style, language, logic, and length, which was an interesting experiment in teaching an LLM sort of the basics of how a piece of journalism should look and feel and read and why. Yeah, so that's basically our last slide here. This is just a recap to say that we think we have created a tool that has the ability to enable newsrooms to repurpose larger content looking at bigger trends down to output that is useful to individual sub-communities within their audience, if you like. This is something that is extremely time-consuming if a human newsroom tried to do this on its own. At the same time, we very clearly recognize that this is not something that a machine could at all do on its own. This is genuinely a marriage of human capabilities that are specific to humans, a lot of it based on judgment, as well as understanding a very nuanced, wide-ranging context, and a machine that is able to process a large amount of content that is only going to be read, or the output of which is only going to be read by a fairly small part of the audience, a niche. And so what we see our tool doing here really is bringing the cost for a news organization down for serving niche audiences. And that makes it possible to serve these audiences, because at the moment, for a national news organization to put a reporter on writing individual articles for every county seems well beyond their cost structure. The conclusion we draw from this is that this is an example of where AI can, if you like, enlarge the market that can be served by picking off individual segments that would currently not actually get specific content for their niche. I'll see if I kind of try. Lakshmi, how are we doing on time? Should I show a quick example of what this looks like, or are we out of time?
I'm sorry, Oliver, you're running out of time. So,
Okay,
but that was
well,
a great presentation. Thank you so much. And there are a couple of questions in the Q&A box and in the chat, so feel free to answer them after this. And if you want to drop in your email in case somebody wants to get in touch with you, feel free to do that too. But yes, thank you so much.
I mean, do you want to, since you're seeing, let me just check where are the questions. Do you want to, I'm just going to find if there's any, there's somebody saying who does the final quality check? Very good question. It is always a human. I think this process starts with a human and finishes with a human. So there's really no question of that. I'm trying to see what other questions there are. Julian, if you see any questions we should answer or actually just point it out. Anyways, localizing national news is part of young reporter training. This eradicates it. I don't think so. I think that you will still need somebody to go out and ask questions and write them up. I just think that even within let's say a local newsroom will have to, be able to serve individual parts of a town. Let's say you can break this segmentation down further and further. I mean, this could be a long discussion about, clearly what the internet is doing is by bringing down the cost of distribution, more and more small niches can be served. So I think it's inevitable that even a local newspaper will start doing this, where a local, young trainee news reporter might be writing stories that apply to the entire town. But a machine can then help them break that down for individual districts. So I think this can happen at any level.
Oliver, I really do think we are out of time now. So thank you both so much for your presentation.